Welcome, Oakland A's fans around the globe. This is another episode of Athletics After Dark. It's a podcast and blog where we celebrate the past and embrace the future of A's baseball. It's Wednesday, February 27th, 2013, and this is podcast number 106. And joining me today is a longtime friend of the show, Rick Tittle, on-air personality over at 95.7 The Game and Sports Byline USA. And as much as I enjoy hearing Rick on the air, he's a very down-to-earth person too, and that's one of the characteristics that I respect about him most. Rick, it's been a while. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, it's good to hear you, Dale. Nice to see AAD back in effect.
Right on. Well, going over some A's history today, Rick, a few former A's players' birthdays are today. Happy birthday to Matt Stairs, to Ron Hassey, and Greg Cadere. Of course, Stairs rejuvenated his career in Oakland in the late '90s and early 2000s, and Hassey caught some good pivotal games for the A's in the late '80s. And Cadere was a nasty lefty in the pen as well. Do you remember any of those players, Rick? I'm sure you do.
Well, it comes to mind. I mean, Matt Stairs, number 12, I think signature moment for me, and I got to talk to him about this one time, was a pinch hit grand slam at Candlestick when Interleague first got underway, and everybody looked at him when he first came in and thought, who is this little softball player? But he's a pretty good athlete. You know, he played shortstop for Team Canada. I think about Greg Cadere. I mostly think about him in the Ricky Henderson trade when they traded Eric Plunk and Luis Polonia and Cadere to New York to get Ricky back in '89, which really helped the team get over the top. And then when I think about Ron Hassey, I think about, Bob Welch's personal catcher and the guy who would give Steinbach a day off. And he was probably about as slow as they come, but he always seemed to be able to get on base. And, those are the things that pop into my head when you throw out those names. Happy birthday to all those guys.
Right. It's interesting because Hassey only played with the A's 3 seasons, yet he's a fan favorite over the years. I mean, he's always stuck out as one of the solid catchers that the A's had, and I guess you just remember him as a link to those glory, years of the late '80s and early '90s with the A's.
Yeah, he was a vet when they got him, and I thought that was a good thing to do. I mean, Steinbach at that time, he was All-Star Game MVP in Cincinnati, and he was sort of in his pomp, and it was good to have, and instead of a young catcher as the backup guy, an established vet like Hassey, and it was a pretty good deal for Hassey in those days to come over to the best team in baseball with the highest payroll. And like I said, Bob Welch trusted in him, and it was a win-win for Hassey and the A's.
Yeah, and Welch won 27 games that year in 1990. We haven't spoken in a while, since last year, Rick, and a great deal has happened since then. Personally, in my decades of following A's baseball, I can't recall a more magical A's season than last year. How would you and where would you place last season in your annals of A's history, Rick?
Well, I think in baseball history, and I know people might think I'm biased, but in baseball history, there are very few stories about a team that was so predicted to do poorly, to not just make the playoffs, but win the division. And you had the general manager and the ownership of the team telling the fan base, look, we can't compete with Texas. We can't compete with the Angels, and there's no reason for us to spend money and finish third. We're going to rebuild. We're going to trade 3 all-star pitchers who are still in their 20s because we think we can't afford them down the line. So let's stock our farm system up again. I mean, Sacramento was getting bone dry. They were calling up people like Matt Watson and Matt Carson. They wanted to stack up the farm system. But, don't tell that to Bob Melvin and those guys. I mean, I thought it was ludicrous for Billy Beane to get Executive of the Year when he hands Bob Melvin the team that struck out more than any team in history. He hands them 5 rookies in a rotation. Inge gets hurt. They don't go to get a third baseman. They call up Donaldson again. Who would know that he would finally hit? Bob, the American League Manager of the Year award should be named the Bob Melvin Manager of the Year award in the American League. I mean, it's the most tremendous job I've ever seen, and it was just so depressing at this time last year. Although the A's played very well in spring training, but you never know how that's going to translate. But it's a lot better feeling this time around to see that Billy has made moves to strengthen the team, and I think they're better this year. And you think about trying to defend that crown instead of saying, oh, we're Oakland, we're poor, we can't compete. This time around, I mean, if the rumors are true that the Royals and Dayton Moore offered Will Myers straight up for Brett Anderson, I mean, that trade would have gone down in a second. The year before, top center field prospect for a pitcher who's going to make a little bit of money. And I think had Brett Anderson not been hurt last year with the Tommy John, I think he would have been dealt. But they go out and Pennington for Young is such a steal. I can't believe it. And taking a chance on Nakajima, and then trading Carter and Stassi and Peacock, three guys who probably weren't going to help. Although I'm a Carter fan, they probably weren't going to help this year. To get a guy like Lowry who definitely is going to help in some way. I'm just very happy to see that the A's aren't being their defeatist, oh, look at us, we're so poor, and they're actually having a little pride in themselves and trying to defend that crown.
There's a lot more optimism, definitely, than last year. And while I'm happy for the organization, Rick, their first AL West title since 2006, and I'm elated for the fans who, let's admit, had to weather a lot of uncertainty about a stadium, and still do to a degree. They had to endure some losing seasons, and seen many of their fan favorites traded away. I mean, let's face it, A's fans are conditioned to seeing some fan favorites traded away. That's just the way we're conditioned. And to see these fans show up last year at the ballpark, wave their white towels in the playoffs, and ultimately become one of the most radical fans of the postseason last year, Rick, it really showed the country and the baseball world that the A's fan base is still alive and well.
I think a lot of people don't understand that this market, which has 6 million people, that if the A's are doing well, you're going to have at least 1 million who care. And we know there are more Giants fans, but to say that there aren't that many A's fans, you and I know that's not true. Now, hardcore, a lot of those people who came to those playoff games and that last homestand of the season, I mean, that Wednesday was magical, and it was a lot of corporate guys and corporate women who, everybody loves a winner, and then that was the hot ticket in town. And believe me, we'll take every fan we can get, but I just think it's funny, the 180 swing from, the 80s, as we were talking about, the A's were sort of the corporate team with the high payroll. They were the best in baseball, and the Giants played in a terrible park, and they were sort of the blue-collar kind of grungy hipster team, and you had to be a true fan to support the Giants. And now that's a 180. The Giants are the corporate team with the great, world champions, and then the A's are kind of the team that's supposed to be the underachievers and low payroll and grungy, and it's a little bit, you're more of a true fan if you're an A's fan. I just think it's funny how that's switched. I mean, you and I have seen from the 80s until now, people wear A's hats, and then the Giants win, and they switch to Giants hats, and it's a free country, you can do that, but I really admire the fans who are, college age and younger, who never really saw the A's do much, and to experience that playoff run. Because you and I, we've seen the A's at the top of the hill. I've seen the A's in 6 World Series and seen them win 4 with my own eyes. So at least I have that base. A lot of these young fans didn't have anything, and so I was really happy for them that their loyalty was rewarded.
Mm-hmm. It was great to see you last year, Rick. I was watching some TV on Comcast, and you were getting doused in that locker room celebrating as well.
Well, I will tell you that was something that I'm a little bit embarrassed about, because I'm not a big leaguer. I've never played high school. I mean, I never played baseball after high school. So I was standing there, and I thought this would be my one chance to kind of experience it. And I asked, Chris Carter was standing next to me, and he had 2 full beers, and I asked him to pour the beers on my head. And he said, really? And I said, yes, please. And he obliged. And, it's funny because on TV you see people kind of cringing. I thought it felt great. And it was a hot day, and I was wearing, shorts and a short sleeve polo shirt. And it was a great feeling. And so that was my one little fan moment that I know I'm supposed to be part of the media, but I wanted to participate in the fun there for about 3 seconds.
We'll really appreciate that glimpse into your experience in the playoffs last year. Shifting our attention to this season, Rick, it's fair to ask the question: magical, unprecedented 94 win season and all last year. Did the A's overachieve? And was it one of those rare seasons where everything fell into place? I mean, how much, Rick, are you convinced that last year is going to launch a string of winning seasons for this franchise?
Well, it's funny when people say overachieve. Obviously, when you have the low payroll and you have all these rookies and some older scrub guys like the Gomeses and the Brandon Inges, you're going to say yeah, you overachieve. But from June 1st on, they were the best team in baseball. So, and I remember at FanFest talking to Billy Beane. He said, we didn't sneak up on anybody when
Sure.
you're the best team since June 1st. I would like to believe, and I've been accused of being pessimistic before, but I would like to believe that this will be a springboard to for better times for the A's. I can usually look at the team and see, I don't know where the runs are going to come from. One thing about the 2012 season, and I was saying it as it was going on when I was doing the pre and post game shows, was that everyone's going to say, where were you? And even with a couple months left, I said, you got to get out there because people are going to say, were you there for the 2012 season? But that being said, some of the most horrible, most boring baseball games I've ever seen in my life were in this last season because the A's were so terrible at batting and scoring runs. And you and A's fans will tell you this. It was sort of like labor. Once you get the baby, you forget about the labor. But you'd sit through 8 innings of just atrocious offensive baseball. Luckily, the A's could pitch. And then in the 9th, they'd have a walk-off, and you'd forget about how horrible the rest of the game was. I mean, I admire Bob Melvin for being one of those skippers who's on the top step, who is looking at every pitch. Nothing gets by him. And I remember in the playoffs in Game 4 with Coco's hit, and I asked him after the game at the press conference, I said, you didn't allow yourself to jump up and down or be happy. How do you maintain? And he said, inside I was jumping up and down, but I had to keep my mind on, what's next, and it's just the A's are so fortunate to have a skipper like that who's just on top of everything.
Absolutely. And Billy Beane gets credit for this Moneyball formula and the statistical analysis. But, I wrote a blog on my site and just to give Billy Beane a great deal of credit for hiring, Bob Melvin, the perfect skipper at the perfect time in the middle of June of 2010.
Yeah, and the A's were lucky to have him, and it was really hard for Billy to admit that the Bob Guerin experiment wasn't working. Probably, you'd probably say even a year too late for him to admit that as personal friend. I think it's hard for Billy to get rid of the old guard, the Ellises and the Suzukis and the Penningtons, but in the long run, they weren't winning with those guys, and so. It's been said before that Billy, has his marionette strings on the skipper. I think that's been a little bit overblown, but there's no doubt that Melvin is the perfect guy because Melvin is his own man, but he also knows that Billy is his boss. So I think Billy might be the first guy that he really can just trust to run things without maybe having to look over his shoulder all the time.
Mm-hmm. And looking at the A's moves the last few years, and based on what they've done before 2011 and 12, there seems to be an emphasis right now on depth. Last season, you had a crowded outfield with Coco Crisp, Reddick, Cespedes. Then you had Gomes and Seth Smith thrown in there, and they all managed to work together and put up some decent numbers. And it seems like competition forces a player to step their game up. And this season, you've added Chris Young to the mix, another outfielder, and once again, you wonder how all of this is going to play out. Do you see that this depth trend? You see a new thing for Billy Beane and what he's doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, we as we just said, you have to have depth. When Inge got hurt, I mean, they already tried Luke Hughes. Who else were they going to do? They're going to call Donaldson again, and he had hit bingo numbers. It was like 069. And, trading deadline, the A's did nothing. They waited a couple days to claim Qatar as DFA, and then they waited another month to get Drew. So management last year did not really help the A's whatsoever. It was just sort of, fend for yourself and we'll see what happens. Well, what we saw what happened was that they won the division. So this year management, I think, is helping out a little bit more. And, some lineups write themselves. When A-Rod's healthy, the Yankee infield is A-Rod, Jeter, Cano, Teixeira, left to right. But with the A's, Nakajima at short, I guess. Who's at second? Weeks, Sizemore. Is Moss full-time at first? I suppose. Is Donaldson going to be the third baseman? Where's Lowry going to fit in? Is Lowry going to play third? And then you think about the outfield with 5 guys. The only thing I could say for sure is that Reddick thinks he's the everyday right fielder. Cespedes thinks he's the everyday left fielder. And Seth Smith is going to be the everyday left-handed DH, I believe, when there's a right-handed pitcher. And then you've got Young and Coco there in center. And, you think about how that can work, and it's because Bob Melvin is the great communicator. And Mark Grace called him the mad scientist when he was with Arizona because he liked to screw around with the lineups. Well, how fun is it to come to the park and you've got, 6 infielders and 5 outfielders, and you got a DH? I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of different lineups, although Melvin has said that he would love to see the same lineup, which means everybody's producing. When I asked Bob Melvin at FanFest about Jason Norris, I said it was going to be a straight platoon lefty-righty, and he says that's how it looks right now, but he would love to see one of those guys be the everyday catcher. In other words, if you hit 300 and you play good D, you don't have to worry about coming out if there's a lefty or a righty. So I think it's going to be fun for Melvin. I think it's going to be fun for the fans too, because you might see a lot of different lineups.
Yeah, and it's interesting how just Bob Melvin makes it all work. And I remember on Twitter, McCarthy, I think he said just one brief sentence: Bob Melvin is a witch. Just to describe what he was doing last year.
Yeah, I'm going to miss Brandon. He was.
Yeah.
We both had an affinity for English soccer. I'm a Tottenham fan. He's a Liverpool fan. We used to have a lot of conversations about that. He's a really good guy. I wish him luck in Arizona.
Right. Also, Johnny Gomes. He was a big force last year. Let's talk about the future, Rick. It's been a while since the A's have groomed some offensive studs from the draft. I remember when Jason Giambi, Eric Chavez, and Tejada started to come up in the late '90s, all homegrown talent. And now we have kids like Michael Choice and Addison Russell making some noise. A's were always great at manufacturing great young pitching, but it's great to see those position guys start getting on the radar in Oakland.
Yeah, well, I mean, 3 years in a row with the bats, if you include Grant Green, and I'd love to see him step up. And then, Choice at UT Arlington, if he hadn't got hurt last year, he probably would have had even better numbers. He's already off to a great spring. I asked Bean about Choice at FanFest. He said, looks like Sacramento for the year. And, there could be still a trade. We'll see. But Choice, I think, is ahead of Taylor right now in the outfield. That's why Taylor, I think, is trying first base. And then Addison Russell, I was actually down in Phoenix in July, and I went to Papago Park, and I got to see Addison Russell play a rookie ball game. Michael Anoa was pitching. I saw Nunez at third, and Olson and Robertson, the other two, first picks, if you count the sandwich rounds. And, Russell looked a little bit, kind of, I don't want to say rusty, kind of clunky at short, but he went to short season Vermont after that, and he really worked on his defense. And then he went to the Midwest League with the Burlington Bees, and this year it's going to be the Beloit Snappers in that league. But wherever he went, he was the best player, and his defense really improved. But the main thing is the guy's got a stick, and he hit over 300 everywhere he went, and he's still just 19 years old. I mean, a year ago at this time, he's a senior in high school. So they won't rush him, but they brought him to big league camp, and it was not part of his contract. They brought him to big league camp because they like him. And if you watch that game on Sunday, it was nice seeing him hit a double against a big league pitcher. It was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. So what type of shortstop in the big leagues now would you compare Russell to? I haven't seen him play in person yet. I'm anxious to see that this year, going to some minor league games. Can you compare him to any shortstop that's playing now in the big leagues?
You know what? He's not the most smooth shortstop from what I saw, but from what I actually saw a little video on him from Burlington, and he had actually gotten more smooth at that point. I can't really think of a guy because he's so stocky. To me, I would say if you want to go body wise, and this is high praise, but I'd say maybe like a Barry Larkin type of guy. A guy with maybe even a football body, but a great arm. He's got a great arm, which is something we haven't had around here for a while. Great arm and can hit. So, I mean, if he can be anything like Barry Larkin, that would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Looking at history, Rick, the club hasn't made the 2 consecutive postseasons since the Big Three era in the early 2000s. What team in the AL West are you most concerned about in terms of overtaking the A's this season?
Well, I think the Angels, Artie Moreno, if you had told him last year that 2 teams from the 4-team West would make the playoffs and he wouldn't be one, I don't think he would have believed you. They add a guy like Hamilton. The Rangers are a little bit weaker, but you're talking about a team that in the last 3 years has 2 pennants and a wild card. They're definitely going to be there. Seattle is not as much as a concern, but as we saw last year, the A's still had problems with Seattle. And I mean, how many times did they face King Felix? It seemed like once a month they had to face King Felix, and they'll face him on April Fool's Day. But I just happen to think that in the long run, it's going to be Anaheim with the fantastic young talent they have, but still, I don't think they're going to pitch enough to win, and I'm still feeling good about the A's, and with them, it's all about how these youngsters progress. Parker and Malone both had 13 wins. How are they going to do the second time around in their second full seasons? And so much depends on that. You got your seventh inning guy in Doolittle, who was a first baseman a year and a half ago. You got Cook, who was an all-star closer, and now he's the eighth inning guy. How is he going to do in his second full season? There's so many questions, but the vibe is there. The even without Gomes and Inge there, they still have the same vibe. I've never seen an off season where the fan base was more just thirsty to get this season underway again. And FanFest was only 10,000 people, and it sold out in a matter of hours. I mean, people are very, very excited, and for good reason.
Right, the A's Nation is alive and well, and I'm just happy that opening night this year is not 3 a.m. Pacific time, right, Rick?
And that game, you remember that game wasn't even on TV, which was really, really upsetting. I mean, we got to see it through Seattle's feed, but yeah, I'm glad too. And we got the World Baseball Classic, and there are no A's participating, but that's one of the good things about the WBC, which I'm a fan of, is that we're not going to have a Japan series this year.
Any particular player you're excited to watch play this season for the A's, Rick?
Yeah, speaking of Japan, I'm really excited to take a look at Nakajima.
Mm-hmm.
So many people are saying, position players don't translate over here, and I can think of a guy named Suzuki in New York who translated pretty well. But I went to his press conference when they introduced him, and the guy is just charmed the whole place. He's got an infectious smile, and he really seems like someone who's going to be so vivacious if he can play. And if he hits 250 and fills his position, I'll be quite happy with that. I'm looking forward to seeing him. I'm also looking forward to seeing Jaso as well. I mean, when was the last time the A's had a catcher who could hit? So I would love to see Jaso be a guy who's not going to be an automatic out like our catchers have been for how many last few years.
Yeah, and I'm personally looking forward to seeing Yoenis Cespedes put some MVP numbers. I mean, last year was pretty amazing what he did for his first full year in the big leagues. 280, 19 bombs, and I think the more he learns pitching and just gets more confident, he could definitely put up some MVP numbers.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think about Cespedes, just think like you go to a new country. You've left all your family and friends behind. Everything you know, every kind of food you ever ate, all your coaches, all your mentors, and not only are you in a new country, but now you've got these lights on you and you're supposed to perform, and then they move you to a new position, and he was pretty custian in his first few weeks there, but he got it down, and then if it wasn't for Trout, he would have been Rookie of the Year. What did he hit, like 283? And with, this is a guy who I think now that he's been here, he's really going to do better. He talked about how they didn't even stretch in Cuba, and I was at that day game when he's rounding second, and I saw him pull up. Like people talked about, and I know he mentioned going 40-40. I'd love to have the 40 home runs. I think I don't need the steals because every time he runs, I bite my lip and cross my fingers because I think he's going to pull his hamstring. But if he stays healthy, yeah, you're right. It'd be scary numbers.
Yeah, and last year in the ALDS, he still stole second and third, and he could really just change the game in so many ways. That's Rick Tittle. I'm Dale Tafoya, and this was another episode of Athletics After Dark, where we celebrate the past and embrace the future of Oakland A's baseball. Until next time, Rick, anything you want to tell the fan base today?
If you can hear me on the weekends on 95.7 The Game. My first weekend will be the one coming up on not this coming weekend if you're listening the day this was posted, but the 8th and the 9th I will be doing pre and post on 95.7 The Game.
And we'll be listening.
Or I should say the 9th and the 10th. That's Saturday, Sunday. Sorry.
All right, Rick. We're looking forward to it. Thanks. We'll talk soon.
All right, Dale. See you, buddy.